The Hail Varsity Radio Saturday morning show, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. Strap yourselves in. Here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt.
Y'all don't even know he was a virgin until he's 28, and now, roll tide.
And Mark Cranack.
Time has come for someone to put his foot down. And that foot is me.
Welcome to it, weekend editions here. It's Hail Varsity Radio, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel, Mark Cranack on assignment. That assignment is to rest up and heal up, brother. We'll handle it and check in with you. We are a week away from a road show Saturday, as we'll be at Woodland Hills for Tee Off for Treasures, Tyson's Treasure Chest, of course. A charity and a fundraiser near and dear to our dear friend Jeremiah Searle's heart. So excited to be on the road next Saturday at Woodland Hills for Tee Off for Treasures. That'll be exciting. The task at hand, dive into some football topics. Elijah, 49 days away. 49, the old Trevor Roach number.
7 squared.
Sure, you and your math. But we're getting closer, inching closer to college football in Nebraska, that week 0 showdown with the Fighting Illini. Coming up, plenty of football to dive into with Brad Edwards, our rewind segment. Brad, quarter century with ESPN, college football, FPI, and, of course, his work with ESPN Radio. We'll get some of Brad's takes as we get closer to the season. An hour from now, Brandon Vogel from HailVarsity.com and magazine, managing editor. Vogues will be with us at 8:05. And then the Iron Horse, Gary Sharp, will join us. Check in with Sharpie, get where his gut's feeling. Some of the Nebraska names or Nebraska recruits could go with tomorrow's Major League Baseball draft, as that will go into Monday. Numbers to dive in, 466-3776, 466-3776, 800-825-5865. Can email Chris at HailVarsity.com. Give us a follow on Twitter at Schmidt_radio, Chris Schmidt, or at Herbal Essence for Elijah Herbel. So, interesting morning. One, I did not get up early enough to see Junior and Papa Al pack up and leave. They went through TSA probably about 40 minutes ago out of Omaha. They are flying to Houston so Junior can watch his beloved Yankees in the trash can den, right? So that's where Junior's going to be. He'll be back Monday. Got a chance to shout to him on the way in, and he's his normal jovial self pre-7 a.m. Or pre-noon. We'll just put it that way. Hello? Yes. I mean, just so. Have a good trip, Junior. 2, I was expecting, I caught up with a buddy last night and got home probably about 10:30. It wasn't late. But I usually try and eat within a certain window, and had pizza late, and it was awesome. And my old bones can't do pizza late. I'm just getting soft, brother, in my old age. But as I checked the radar, because again, I'm turning into an old man. What's the weather gonna do? Bro, it got serious and ugly in Omaha. We're talking thousands without power. At least that's what I saw on Twitter. I didn't see a single branch or leaf in the yard. Were you good?
Oh, it was crazy at my house.
Okay, and you're a little bit east of town.
I'm in the northeast corner of town. Yeah.
Yeah, so you're kind of Havelock-ish.
Yeah, and I saw. I mean,
I heard it kind of come through around 1 a.m., but that's it. I mean, I nothing flew through the window, and there's no noticeable, there's a missing part to my vinyl fence. The dogs will have fun with this. I didn't, at least our area, we're southeast of town. I'm total opposite with I'm closer to Kansas and you're closer to
Omaha,
to the interstate,
For me, I had a couple branches down in the yard.
Big branches? Because you probably have older, mature trees. We'll get to football in a minute, I promise. I'm just assessing the damage here.
Decent sized branches down the yard. Lost power for a few hours.
Did you?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I saw some transformers blowing as I was looking at because lightning's not green, is it?
No. I mean, lightning's lightning.
Yeah, I saw some weird colored lightning in the skies, and then my power went out, so I'm not sure if that was a transformer or what, but that came back in the middle of the night at some point after I had gone to bed. But crazy, there's a whole bunch of branches down just in my yard, on my whole block.
Okay.
Looking down the block.
Was it hart to get through?
It was a lot in the yards.
Okay.
But it was powerful. My brother's Traeger grill got pushed across. He didn't lock the wheels, and it got pushed all around his patio, and then his neighbor's brand new fence got blown down.
Dang, I will shut my mouth about
the northeast side of town was
damage.
Legit.
Well, that sucks. I hope your home, if you're listening out there in that part of Lincoln, is all good, man. I'm sorry to hear all that, but yeah, I kind of judge it based on, did my grill move, did my Traeger or / pit boss move. It has only 2 wheels where you pick up on one side.
Yeah, his too, and it ended up on the other side of the yard. Man,
that's messed up. So let's dive in. Really good stuff from The Athletic. They always do their State of the Program series. And one of the features of their preseason preview is expectations versus reality. And that is something that Nebraska fans are staring at for 2021. They've stared at it for 2020. They've stared at it really probably since that last championship run in 2001, as you transitioned away from the Osborne era, and you've had this constant change in either the AD chair or the coaching chair, in a lot of instances both. So expectations versus reality. We'll get into that a little bit with Brandon Vogel and Gary Sharp, but we'll sound off here first for a little bit. And what Max Olson did, I don't know Max, but I know Max's work. And we talk with Mitch Sherman quite a bit. They're close. Max does a great job, first and foremost. But when we talk about expectations versus reality, and what they're doing here is comparing a team's 4-year performance with their recruiting class ratings. You can kind of feel where this is going, because Nebraska was really good about doing well in the off season, even during the Riley era with the Friday Night Lights camp. That's one thing that was one of few things kept and used as a holdover when Coach Frost got here, keeping that going. It was a can-do attitude with recruiting, and Nebraska went after a lot of big fish during the Riley era, but didn't land that many. And the kids they did get, you look at Spielman's no longer here, but when he was here, performed well. JoJo Doman is a phenomenal player. He's a nice get during the Riley era. And you have 2 offensive linemen, Hymas and Farniok, that were recruits from the Riley era. You look at all the NFL guys, either free agent guys or guys that were drafted that Bo produced. He did a really nice job of kind of honing in on some guys they felt really comfortable about being able to get, then develop and raise to a level, be it Nate Gary, Emily Collins, Vincent Valentine, Randy Gregory, Amir Abdullah, Kenny Bell, Anunwa, Brandon Riley, Janovich. Just go down the list of, and then the offensive linemen with Spencer Long and Searles and Qualley. And then Stirrup as well. So you can name off, like, there's not a wrong philosophy as long as you make it happen on the trail to campus development, to what are you doing on Saturdays, and then what's your shot post Saturday with professional ball. I look at what Frost has done, and routinely as the Athletic kind of details that recruiting ranking. Okay, what are you coming in here? What's that rating? And that rating's not necessarily always accurate. And then it's twofold. That rating can be absolutely accurate. What have you done to develop or use that talent? And when it comes to overachievers, teams that end up ranked versus their 24/7 composite ranking. And this isn't a shocker. And one thing you get with a lot of MAC coaches who do make the jump from the MAC to a Power 5, and Matt Campbell and PJ Fleck are two examples. They are guys that find kind of those diamonds in the rough, and they develop really well because they have to, and they kill it. They do well. And Matt Campbell and Iowa State, they come in number one as the number one overachieving program in Power 5. They finish ranked 19th here if you kind of average out 4 years. But their recruiting average is just in front of the 60th ranked recruiting class. And that's a plus 38. Where do you end up in the rankings compared to your recruiting rankings? and to be plus 38 is insane, as you'd expect. Iowa right there. Coach Ferentz, those guys don't do a wonderful job when it comes to winning signing day, but proof is in their NFL talent level. I mean, they look at the tight ends they put in the NFL, look at the offensive line. They're good with defensive line. They're really solid with lines of scrimmage. Wisconsin right there in at 3. Now, their rankings have been right around that top 10, but their recruiting class averages out to being just around number 40. I mean, it's a banner year in Madison if they have like a top 30 class, which they can do, but they're more comfortable getting who they feel fits, and their development's really solid. I mean, their linebacking core, specifically outside linebackers, has been incredible, and they win that every Saturday against teams within their own region. They've beaten Nebraska, they've beaten Iowa, they've beaten Minnesota out for those outside linebackers. And it doesn't hurt to have an ambassador like a J.J. Watt, former MAC guy, transferred to Wisconsin, and that's your poster child of Wisconsin, hybrid defensive linemen. Boston College is there, and then there's Northwestern. You have 4 Big Ten teams that on paper, with the 24/7 composite recruiting, don't do much to sneeze at when it comes to their recruiting ranking. Iowa 44, Wisconsin 40, Northwestern 52, Indiana 53, and they come in. Indiana comes in, routinely here under the Tom Allen era, a top 40 program. Northwestern, obviously a top 30 program. They're a top 25 good school. It feels like year in, year out, barring, a slippage back to 3 and 9. And then there's Iowa and Wisconsin, who a down year for them is that, they're going to be 8 and 5 or 10 and 2, right? There's no real gray area. But this speaks to some proof. Kansas State and Oklahoma State are there, Wake Forest and Utah as well. But this list we just rattled off of most overachieving programs per their recruiting ranking just kind of goes to an identity. Don't you think, Elijah? These teams know what they are. They know who they can get. They're super comfortable and confident with their coaching staff, and they're usually pretty solid on the lines of scrimmage, or they have a niche. Oklahoma State's niche, for instance, has been A, their offense, but B, their skill position. They're always putting some sort of dude either as a running back or wide receiver, even back to the Des Bryant era, into the NFL with a high pick, or, wow, if he pops in the league, if he can handle his business off the field, he can be something special. Now, those are the teams, and a lot of Midwest flavor right there, aside from Wake Forest and Boston College. When it comes to underachieving, teams that kill it on the recruiting signing day, but not necessarily when it comes to wins and losses. And you've seen a program like this struggle. They are in a talent-rich area, and Arkansas leads the list of teams that underachieve from the Power 5. They aren't even a top 100 program. They've had a lot of coaching turnover, but yet their recruiting classes come in at number 30 in the country over the last 4 years. They are minus 73. When you look at where they rank on game day or after game day versus where they rank on signing day. Rutgers in it too. I think that'll get flipped around in short order because Schiano has won there before, and he'll clean up the Eastern Seaboard. Florida State is in at 3. They are not. They are the biggest shocker to me on this list because we're not. What are we? 8 years? 8 years removed from a national championship with Jameis. Does that just blow you away? In 2 4-year recruiting cycles, Florida State is now a team that barely registers as a top 60 program when you look at the finish. But yet on signing day, Jimbo Fisher had them in the top 5, top 3. He was killing it in recruiting, and then said, I'm out. And think about that. He chose to go from, it's really Florida State or Clemson in the ACC because Miami had been down so long. He went, and there's 10 million reasons why, to go, let's go hook up with LSU and Bama and Ole Miss and the Pirate in the SEC West and maybe get a crossover with Florida or Tennessee or Georgia, right? He chose to go to the SEC. He got paid to go to the SEC. But Florida State comes in here at number 3.
See, Florida State, I would think 1. Like, that's the number 1 school I think of in terms of underachieving. It's them and Tennessee. Tennessee, I feel like underachieves. I don't know if they're on the list or not.
Oh, yeah. Tennessee comes in at 8, just behind Nebraska. UCLA, I totally agree with.
Yeah.
Because during the Jim Mora era, they still put a lot of guys into the NFL, but they're always 8-4. They're always 8-4, and they're playing in some non-prestigious Pac-12 tie-in bowl game. They're not even in the freaking Holiday Bowl, right? I mean, they're in the Foster Farms Bowl. Like a third-tier bowl game. Maryland's right there. Maryland's recruited well, but a lot of that's Durkin. And then the aftermath of him, he recruited at a high level, being a guy that coached for Harbaugh and Urban Meyer. But the crux of this is Nebraska. Nebraska comes in per the program ranking at number 76, and Nebraska the last 4 years has averaged a recruiting class of 25th in the country. That's minus 51, just behind Illinois. Illinois is recruited at a 55th best level, but yet they're 108th. Okay, and they're the fear factor week 1. What Illinois team are you going to get? What Nebraska team are you going to get? But with Nebraska, it's hard for me to see this number and say, is Nebraska underachieved? I don't disagree with that. Yes, I think they've underachieved. I think they underachieved in 2015. They were a 9 or 10 win football program with all that came back, but you had the coaching transition, and they went 6-7. I think they underachieved in 2017 at a 4-8 level, coming off a 9-4 football season. Okay, and I think they absolutely underachieved in 2019. I'm not alone with that. I think it was hard to tell what 2018 was going to be, but based on their momentum, I think they did a hell of a job to finish the season as strong as they did. You go into 2019, and you had a bunch of kids that were in position that they'd never been in, and that's that target because of expectations, how they finished the year. They're a top 25 program, and Nebraska had some tough ball games. Nebraska's been right there in moments. We just highlighted Iowa. We just highlighted Wisconsin. We just highlighted Northwestern. You've beaten Northwestern. You've been close to Iowa the last 3 years where it was a tight enough ball game where you could have flipped it. You make a play during a series. You get better at special teams. You get a little better at stopping a drive and keeping the kiss-blowing field goal kicker out of range. And maybe you get one.
Duncan.
Okay, right? And then with Wisconsin, those scores have been double digits, or but it wasn't Melvin Gordon bad. All right, so that gap has closed a little bit. On this list, you can absolutely nod your head and say, you know what, Nebraska's been a team that's underachieved. We got to get to the why. Why? And I think the biggest part of me with why Nebraska's underachieved is you just haven't kept your kids. You've had so much attrition, so much roster turnover, some of that by design, which is fine, but you just don't know. that you can tell me Nebraska's had a top 25 recruiting class, but I can tell you a lot of those top 25 recruits are no longer here. So that's a little bit of a misnomer to me. 21 here and now, what do you get? I mean, Nebraska had a good recruiting class. You have some of those key pieces from 2019 gone, but you also have some key pieces from 2020 here. And I'm thinking of a guy, like a Turner Corcoran that is going to be leaned on that left side of the offensive line. You look at Gabe Irvin, a guy that is really new to the program, but may have to carry the football a lot. And you're also looking at some guys like Casey Rogers and Trevor Robinson, newer recruits, part of that 4-year top 25 average that you feel pretty good about and you think can pop. So Nebraska's underachieved for sure on the field. I don't know that the top 25 ranking recruiting-wise is 1,000% accurate because of the attrition. We'll hear from Brad Edwards coming up. It's a weekend edition, Hail Varsity, presented by the Nebraska Lottery.
Now back with Hail Varsity Radio, presented by the Nebraska Lottery, with Chris Schmidt and Mark Cranack.
Back into it, Hail Varsity Radio, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. Let's talk some college football, some NIL, some FPI. We welcome in college football insider and author, Dynasty by the Numbers, Bama's greatest run, the best decade in college football. Brad, I'm sure I just screwed that up. Correct me, my friend, at JBradEdwards on Twitter. But your book is going to be a lot of fun for college football fans, Dynasty by the Numbers. How are you? It's July, my friend.
It is July, so we're getting close. And actually, about 2 weeks, less than 2 weeks away from at least SEC Media Days, and they're usually the first one to go off, and then other conferences to follow. So, yeah, I would say that we're getting to that time where people start to more seriously focus on college football and get excited for the season. I think maybe some fan bases are more apprehensive than excited, but at least right now everybody's undefeated.
You pretty much painted the picture here. What's the level of trepidation for Nebraska fans? We'll get into some Husker topics. And you mentioned Big Ten Media Days, or just Media Days in general. I have not had the pleasure of SEC Media Days, but I hear they're a party down in Hoover. Typically, Indianapolis is the site for this year's Big Ten Media Day extravaganza. We'll be there on site doing shows, which will be cool. But I got to ask you, have you been to Indy? And is the shrimp cocktail at St. Elmo's for real?
I have not been to St. Elmo's. I have been to Indy. I actually did an internship with the Colts when I was in college. Now I got to date myself here. This is when the Colts were absolutely horrible. This is pre-Peyton Manning. It was actually the year that they were so bad that they had the first 2 picks in the draft when Steve Entman and Quentin Coryatt went 1-2.
Brad, do we have you, bud?
You got me now? We
got you now. You just left off with Coryatt and Entman 1-2. I remember that. That was 92, wasn't it?
Coryatt. Yeah, so they had gone 1-15 the previous year, and they ended up going, I think it was 9-7. It was 9-7 or 7-9 the season that I worked for them. But yeah. So in other words, I have been to Indianapolis, and I think I was there 2 other times. Once for a Big Ten championship game, and I believe once for a women's Final Four when I was with ESPN.
Okay. Well, so what are the Brad Edwards recommendations? I guess is what I'm asking from what your memory serves.
I would. Let's put it this way: if I go back there again, I will have to try St. Elmo's.
Okay.
When I was there before, I was always on some sort of plan where I had a what would be the best way to describe it? A per diem,
sure.
I guess, where anything I didn't spend on food, I got to pocket. And I think that you have a lot of listeners who will appreciate this. It's like when you're going to get, let's just say, $48 a day for food, you go get fast food as many times as you can, and then you save the rest of it, and then you go buy a game for the Xbox or something like that when you get home. So that's that was my MO back then. I wasn't really concerned with fine dining as much as I was saving up money.
That makes sense. I'll take the 2-for-1 deal. And look, Brad is $45 for Tuesday already. How is this NIL gonna be entertaining or interesting in your eyes down, not just across college football, but the SEC well? We all know how competitive the SEC is. Do you see it helping some of the mid-range programs, and I'm using that mid-range term with all due respect? Can it make a dent when it comes to attracting talent? I look at some of the stories this week. I look at Miami, a big boosters giving the football team, I think $500 total investment of just shy of $550,000. He's a gym owner down in Miami. Yeah. I look at Uncle Phil at Nike, Phil Knight, and Thibodeau is partnering with Tinker and Phil, the guy who did the Air Jordans, of course. That's pretty unique and really cool for Oregon with how they kind of reinvented and separated themselves with the wardrobes right on top of the Chip Kelly Blur style. Now, what are some things you think could happen down in the SEC? Bama already develops you, and you're really good anyway to go there. So they've been killing it without NIL. What's Bama's plan of action in your mind, and also what are some other options for schools?
Yeah, I mean, I think whether it's Alabama or any of the other top programs, the question is this going to affect what to this point has been the predictability of recruiting, which is that the best players want to go where they're going to have the best chance to get to the next level. And obviously Alabama, Ohio State, and a few others. Are there any now that might say, hey, that's less important to me than being able to make a few $1,000s more while I'm in school? Now, I think a lot of us have to put ourselves back in that mindset of when we were 18, 19, 20, and, $2,000 meant a lot more to us back then than it might today. I'm not saying it's chump change today. I mean, for some people it is. But I just have to remember, what would I have thought at age 17 or 18 if someone was telling me that I would get $2,000 for this compared to what I would think of it today. Mm-hmm. And that's where you hope that, that all these kids, and I know it's not the case for all of them, but you hope that they have people who have that greater perspective, who can kind of advise them on short-term versus long-term, and to make sure they're doing the things that are, best for their long-term interests. But one of the things that I think that we'll have to see how it shakes out is, does big program automatically equal big money? I've seen people debate, a USC, for example, versus,
Brad, you cut out. You cut out right after USC. Can you reset for us?
Yeah, so I'll try to clean that up.
No, that's fine.
So what I think is going to be interesting is, whether a program in a big city, I mean, I guess the ultimate example of this would be USC, compared to, someone more like an Alabama or let's just say a Georgia that are located in a real college town. Maybe Georgia's a bad example because they're not too far from Atlanta. Mm-hmm. Is it going to make a difference? Because on one hand, you'd say, all right, you're going to have all these opportunities if you're in a big city. But on the other hand, if that big city already has professional athletes that are more marketable, is it really going to make that much of a difference to you to go to a place where there are a lot more people? I don't know. I think ultimately what we're going to see is that there are going to be a whole lot of players in what we would consider non-revenue sports, outside of football and men's basketball, that are going to do really well off of this. And I don't mean an entire roster of them, but I mean some select player, and they might not all be All-Americans, but for one reason or another, they're very marketable. And I think that's the reason that this needed to happen. Mm-hmm. It's because for certain people, the greatest marketability they will ever have in their life is while they're in college. And it has always struck me as completely un-American to deny someone the opportunity to capitalize on that. And so, we'll see what happens there. You mentioned the Miami situation where the gym owner is giving everybody on the team a certain amount of money. Whether that's a lot of money to him, I have no idea. Obviously, that wouldn't be a lot of money to someone like Phil Knight. But I've always thought that people who have made a lot of money, they didn't get there by being stupid or by being irresponsible, when it comes to money and budget. And so while there might be a few people, whether they're legitimate businesses or whether it's just a booster who's trying to help recruiting, they may go over the top a little bit here the first year or two, but I think eventually what you're going to see is that there's just not a lot of value in going after unproven players. Because we all know there's so many 4- and 5-star recruits out there who everyone expects to be the next All-American, the next first-round pick, and a lot of them just don't pan out. That's just the way it's always been. And so if you're a business, do you want to roll the dice and make a big investment in someone like that, or do you want to wait and see, okay, who ends up being that proven commodity, and who can I invest in, who I might be able to sustain a relationship with once they go pro and become an even bigger deal. And so I just think there's so much that it's going to have to work itself out over the next year or two that there are a lot of reasons to be concerned with some of what we're seeing right now and whether this could end up being a complete fiasco. But I think eventually it's all going to work itself out, and it may end up, operating very differently 2 years from now than it is at the moment.
Few minutes here. Brad Edwards with us, college football insider and author, Dynasty by the Numbers, with us here on Hail Varsity Radio. You can follow Brad on Twitter at @JBradEdwards. Brad, there's an updated FPI ranking out. You have some changes, some amendments, and shifting. Mississippi State now just inside the top 25 versus being number 8. Miami's up there in the top 10. A lot of love for Iowa State and Oklahoma. Ohio State's there. Let's get into margin for error, right? And let's talk about that. And I know that's part of the FPI calculation. When we talk about error, we talk about turnovers and special teams, hidden yardage, all those things that can make things a lot closer. One example last year, I thought Indiana was a really good football team, and they were one of the few teams to really push Ohio State. You go dig into that a little bit. That was probably, aside from the Northwestern outing, the worst game for Justin Fields. You have turnover issues, and that's how you have a closer ball game. You have a 14 to 17 point spread, and next thing you know, Ohio State's double-digit lead is a drive away from either tying or losing the game. But you know what? There's just a certain gap, and if you help another team out, that gap closes.
Yeah, and that's the way that it's always been. And we had all the excitement in recent months over the presumed expansion of the playoff, and what that would mean for the sport. And everyone gets excited over the idea of maybe a number 8 could upset a number 1 at some point, or a 7 over a 2, and it will occasionally happen because of stuff like that. Where the 1 or 2 seed just goes out and makes a lot of mistakes they don't typically make, and the other team plays really well. But for the most part, in most seasons, there is a pretty big gap between whether it's the top 2 and everyone else, or the top 3, top 4. But there's a very select group of teams that typically have a talent edge over the rest of the country. And where that will prove to be this year, I don't know, but my bet is it will be a number 4 or smaller. And so you get beyond that, and then you've got another cluster of teams that are, approximately number 4 or 5, all the way down to about, 16 to 20, that there's not a whole lot of difference between them. And then you get this other group where you get, from somewhere around number 20 to 25 all the way back to 65 to 70, where there's not much separating those teams. And, ultimately everyone, makes judgments on how good teams are based on their record. But a lot of times, just the difference between being the 9-3 team and the let's say 5-7 team is what you were saying. It's inopportune turnovers. It's injuries at the wrong position. Or a string of injuries at one position. There's so many things that you can't control that either go into the good luck or bad luck category that often dictate why one team ends up appearing to be a lot better than another team that's pretty even in talent. And I think that's what the fun thing is with these seasons. It's not, okay, who are going to be the best 4 teams and who's going to make the playoff. I mean, as much as we wish there was a lot of mystery there typically isn't. It's the next 2 tiers, that I mentioned. It's filling out the top 20 or 25. It's, who has a winning record versus a losing record. That's where those fine margins come into play. And as you know all too well, that's kind of where Nebraska's found itself for the last decade or more is, in those fine margins where, there's not a whole lot separating that winning record and being a bowl team from, being worse, and obviously the idea of just being a bowl team has for most of Nebraska's history kind of been assumed, and the fact that they've gotten to the point now where there is doubt and even a mild degree of excitement over having that winning record, I think it's obviously a big adjustment for a lot of people who've been following the program for a long time.
Brad Edwards is with us here on Hail Varsity Radio. And Brad, a season is so unpredictable. But when we had Phil Steele on last week, he kind of broke down his college football preview, and we learned that he has put Oklahoma and Ohio State both in his top 4. Both those teams are on Nebraska's schedule this year. Oklahoma's at number 1, Ohio State's at number 3, according to Phil Steele. But I just want to get your take. How much stock should we put into these preseason polls?
Well, as you know, one of the major things that goes into them is how many players are coming back. And while you consider that to be very meaningful at the moment, we really don't know how well that's going to hold up. I mean, you are going to have injuries, in the first few weeks of the season that'll change the face of some of these teams. And then, in some cases, you'll have a player who people are making assumptions about that turns out to be either much better or much worse than people had assumed. And so there are all sorts of variables that always go into this to dictate, whether a team is truly a playoff contender or whether they end up in that next tier where they're just kind of hovering around in the top 20 for most of the season. And so, Ohio State they've done this for so long that you just feel like it doesn't matter who the quarterback is. They've got so much more talent than most of the teams on their schedule that it would pretty much be impossible for them to lose more than 2 games. That's the way it's felt for a long time now, and it's obviously been a long time since they lost more than 2 games in the regular season. So I would expect you have more of that from them. And then Oklahoma, while I think they have some competition in the Big 12, they've obviously owned that league for I don't know, was it 5 or 6 in a row they've won now, and have a really talented offense and a defense that appears to have improved a lot over the last couple of years. So I think they have to be the favorite to win the Big 12, but are they untouchable? I don't think so, and then that's where I see a difference between Oklahoma and Ohio State. Like, it's as great as Oklahoma could be offensively, up and down the roster, both sides of the ball, they don't have the talent and certainly not the depth that a team like Ohio State has. And so I don't know that Oklahoma would be able to survive certain injuries as well as the Buckeyes might be able to. But unless they have some bad luck, I would expect both of those teams are going to be right there in that playoff door at the end of the season, knocking on it.
Couple more minutes. Brad Edwards with us, College Football Insider, Hail Varsity Radio. Brad, we talk about different parts of Nebraska, the margin for error, the expectations, the fan base, the passion. You've been to Lincoln a few times. You were in studio with us. how do you compute the sellout streak? As a guy who's covered college football on a national level, what does Nebraska's sellout streak mean to you? What's your impression of it? I say that because there's some concern with if it can hold up based on what many people look at as a tough season ahead.
Yeah, I think for most people, I think it's an example of just how hardcore and loyal that fan base is, and the fact that they are so far removed from the glory days. I hate to say that, but I think that the facts speak for themselves, and that the streak hasn't ended yet. I think it says a whole lot about Nebraska fans and how much they support their team and they love the program, even when they're not competing for championships. I'm sure you could play devil's advocate and say, well, there's not as much to do in Nebraska as there might be in some other places, and that's part of the reason that the streak has continued. And I would say, you know what, that's true, but it's also true for a number of other places around the country where they don't have a sellout streak and certainly have not managed to keep the same level of fan engagement despite some down years. So I think it says a lot. I don't know. It's tough because this is what, year 4 with Frost, and so you got a coach who is one of your own. Year 4 is obviously that year where most of the roster is now made up of his own recruits, and that is typically when most people would say that if a coach can't get it done in year 4, I mean, unless there are some serious extenuating circumstances, then if he's not showing progress by year 4, then there's every reason to wonder whether it's going to happen. And so I think this is going to be a year where you're going to potentially learn a lot about where this program is likely to be over the next 2 or 3 years and beyond. I have no idea what the expectation is. You could tell me a lot better, but I look at the schedule, and you mentioned, or Elijah mentioned, the games where are probable losses, Oklahoma and Ohio State, and then there are a whole lot of other games where there's certainly the possibility they could lose. I mean, let's put it this way. You've probably played this game on the air. That's a win, that's a loss, whatever. There aren't a whole lot of games on that schedule I look at and I say, that's a win.
You're not
there are
using
a bunch of them where I say could go either way.
Well, it's in pencil, not ink, Brad. When you fill out the old garage schedule, right? The old Husker poster in your garage. Usually it's ink. It's all pencil this year. And Brad, last thought here, Dynasty by the Numbers. Where can folks get your book?
Yeah, so the website is going to launch. I'm trying to think what the day is. I believe it's July 19th, whatever the Monday is.
Okay.
We're gonna launch the website and open for pre-orders. If you are a fan of college football history, or you happen to be an Alabama fan living in Nebraska, the website name it's not active right now, so don't bother going there. But it's going to be BamaDynastyBook.com is where it can be ordered, and then we should have the books at the very beginning of August to start shipping out.
Well, awesome work on this project. I can't wait to read it. And thanks for talking some ball with us. We'll do this again soon.
Look forward to it. Take care.
The Hail Varsity Radio Saturday Morning Show, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. Strap yourselves in. Here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt.
Y'all don't even know he was a virgin until he's 28, and now roll tide.
And Mark Cranack.
Time has come for someone to put his foot down. And that foot is me.
Back to it, Hour 2. It's Hail Varsity Radio, presented by the Nebraska Lottery, Weekend Edition. Chris Schmidt, Elijah Herbel. Bless his soul. Mark Cranack on the men partner. We'll get you back next week. And excited to spend time here with managing editor from HailVarsity.com and magazine, his usual Saturday spot, Brandon Vogel, with us. Follow him on Twitter at Brandon L. Vogel. And read his book, with John Cook, Dream Like a Champion. Vogues, as you're handicapping things, not only the old office pool on Timeline, but also candidates for this new Nebraska AD. How was your draw, and where are your odds at right now for who and when?
The field is a 1-to-1 favorite at this point because I think a couple of the early candidates that we all identified as time has gone on. Pollard came out and said straight up that he's a Cyclone. Ed Stewart seems like he could still be in the mix, though. If that were the pick, it seems like we would have heard something at this point. So I think it's a truly open search. These things are pretty tough. If there's not a kind of a slam dunk candidate who has an immediate connection to your school, there's a reason they always hire search firms for these sorts of things, because it's a big job. It's a tough job. It gets tougher as time goes on. You don't just have to manage. You're running a pretty big business when it comes down to it. And, by the way, you got to have a pretty good knowledge of college athletics across the board. So, at this point, nothing would surprise me, because I think everything would surprise me is the way it has gone for me so far.
No, and Ronnie Green pretty clear on the timeline. July, you've got the search firm to do its thing. You've had a chance to, I'm sure, review some candidates. Just your take on some of the candidates that, or I should say names, can't really call them candidates, right? Because the search firm has not divulged who all the candidates are. But you got Garrett Glassy down there that is doing a good job of navigating through NIL. You hear Trev Alberts' name, and then your partner, John Cook. I'm sure there's I'm sure there's a part in the Dream Like a Champion section that you can all inform us about how it's a dream for John Cook, part of that Dream Like a Champion, to be an AD, right?
No, that wasn't covered in the book. And
I know.
I've never spoken specifically with him about, which is kind of interesting. Over the past couple of years, I would say, when it's like, okay, well, Moose is here and things are going well, and eventually Nebraska's going to need somebody else. Cook's name started to bubble up. It's just, I think at this stage in his career, with the kind of players he has coming back for this season, but also this recruiting class that he's welcoming, I just don't know if the timing lines up. But, I think he's a competitive person, and he would love the challenge of kind of getting Nebraska to a place where it once occupied pretty frequently across the board, across all sports, would motivate him. I just worry that it's kind of the wrong timing for that one, as this goes on, and as there's no kind of easy candidates that emerge where it's like, oh yeah, you just go get that guy. I really kind of look for Nebraska to bring in an outside hire, which means, it'll be a little bit like Eichhorst, in terms of, and I know that probably set off alarm bells for some people. But
Vogue, it's 8:10 in the morning.
Yeah, they need somebody, I think, who really has kind of a comprehensive vision for what Nebraska athletics is going to be 3, 4, 5 years from now. And at that point, you're kind of turning over every rock and checking every option.
Brandon, at this point, do you think that we're going to have a new AD in place at Nebraska before the Big Ten Media Days? That seems like that's just a date that would make a lot of sense to have a new AD in place by the time you make it out to Indianapolis. But do you think that's a realistic timeline?
Yeah, we're getting pretty close to hitting that. I mean, I think you'd basically have to have an announcement and somebody set to be in place this week, I would think, to be able to do that. If they're not sure, if they're not ready by that point, I don't think it's the worst thing, because if you announce somebody, say, the Monday of Big Ten Media Days, then a lot of the questions Frost gets are going to be about his new boss. If there's not somebody in place, I strangely think it could be to Frost's advantage at media days, because then you deal with like one question about, hey, what do you hope for in a new athletic director? And then you get to actually talk about football. So it's kind of 6 of one, half dozen of the other. He's got to get asked about it. It's just a matter of how. Is it talking about a new guy or talking about what he hopes the new person could be?
Now, Brandon, I don't want to call the Bill Moose regime at Nebraska leaky, but it kind of felt like in the media we had an idea of who Nebraska was looking at for at least the big hires they were making. When I look at Hoiberg, Will Bolt, Coach Frost, all those were kind of out there before the news actually broke. But whenever you bring in a search firm, they're pretty...
they're paid
shut.
to be silent.
Yeah, they keep those lips shut. So do you think we're going to have anything... like leaking out about who the potential candidates could be, maybe so they can get a feel for what Nebraska fans have to say? Or do you think this is going to be just a hire that is just, they announce a press conference one day and they're going to announce their guy?
Yeah, I would guess the way this probably goes. So you hire a search firm for their expertise, yes, but that's maybe only half of it. It might be even less than half of it. What you really hire them for is the ability to do these things confidentially. I would say with the past athletic director hires that I've been a part of, covering at Hail Varsity, once they have their person is when things, a day or two early maybe, is when things kind of start to leak out. That happened when Osborne took over. That happened with Eichhorst, happened with Moose. So that tends to be it. So I would be surprised if it's like, well, here are the 4 people that they're really serious about. It's usually down to 1 before you start hearing too much. So at that point, no, I don't think it's really kind of floating a test balloon, because they're set. They're dotting the I's and crossing the T's and getting ready to hold a press conference at that point.
Brandon Vogel's with us, HailVarsity.com and magazine managing editor at Brandon L. Vogel on Twitter. Vogues, I'm going to throw a name out, get your reaction, and we can just play Name That AD, as we get into another week. John Cunningham, Cincinnati.
Yeah. How long has he been there?
2019. I've got the resume here. 2019 is when he got ascended to Cincy's AD, was pretty much instrumental in the Fleck hire at Minnesota. Boise, Syracuse, Minnesota, fundraising guru, Wallet, the Gopherville with that new football stadium, TCU grad, Nebraska Law School grad, Nebraska native, Pius Thunderbolt, and is an expert in compliance. I mean, that's a money rundown. Boise, TCU, Syracuse, Minnesota, Cincinnati, Pius.
Yeah, I mean that does. There's a lot to like about
Maryland.
That. I mean,
Is it Maryland?
Cincinnati's. Yeah, you look at Cincinnati's football program right now. I know when you and I were growing up, Chris, Cincinnati basketball was a big deal. Fell on a little bit of went away for a little bit, but has been better of late. And you got the Nebraska tie. I mean, that is the resume of somebody who you'd be shocked if he didn't at least get a call for this, given all that he has accomplished outside of Nebraska. And then the fact that he is a local is kind of the cherry on top.
You've got, you got words of praise from Richard Pitino. You have words of praise from P.J. Fleck, from Jimmy Boeheim. Hey, this guy's got all the bases covered between compliance at some places that frankly had to deal with compliance. I think of Maryland, Syracuse, TCU, Boise, and I know the Nebraska tie. The thing about this is he is either because he's a good dude to work for, or from a timing standpoint, you have Fickle. And he's not gone anywhere, right? He's the one hot name that hasn't gone anywhere from Group of 5 to Power 5 the last 3 to 5 years. And he had his minding the candy store moment with Ohio State, and he quite frankly didn't do that bad. He didn't do that bad, and he was man enough to go back to being a defensive coordinator once Urban took over, okay? I mean, think about that. You're the interim coach. in that bridge between Tressel and Urban. You got to go back to 2011 for it. But he did a good job. I mean, I know a 6-6 Ohio State team's like, what's going on in this world? But they were pretty good the year after. So I just think, Fickell's got to like working for the guy because he's still there. It sucked for him to lose Mick Cronin, but Cincinnati's trying to build up. He has been to the Power Five, and he's run in a short time a good Group of Five squad. So, and you tell me this, Vogues, and we'll get into some football talk here in a moment, but Nebraska-wise. But did he inherit Fickell, or does it sound like he made the hire? Help me with the timeline there.
He got to Cincinnati in 2019.
Yes. Has Fickell been there since?
So he would have
inherited him.
He would have inherited him, but still, like with someone like Fickell, who, and I think you're right. Highlighting that Ohio State year, Fickell is to me is somebody who is very smartly playing the long game with his coaching career. Mm-hmm. Like you said, not everybody's willing to go back and be a DC, particularly when you're in the interim in a tough spot and you go 6-6. Like, it could be, I'll just jump someplace else. No, he stayed there and did that and earned another job. And he hasn't jumped at the first couple of opportunities had after turning Cincinnati into a top 25 team. So really smart on his end. What that means from an AD perspective, though, is you've got to kind of be in constant conversations and continuing to keep a candidate like that there as long as you can. Which, maybe isn't quite the challenge of having to go out and hire somebody new and identify the next big thing, guy who's going to have a ton of success, but it's still something.
It is, and we can say a lot of things about the boat rower, but he just gets it done. I mean, he gets it done, and I point back to Cunningham's involvement with getting that deal done to get Fleck to Minnesota. They've been pretty good. Vogue's pretty good story from our friends over at The Athletic, specifically when it comes to overachieving and underachieving. Nebraska comes in just right in front of Tennessee, I believe, when it comes to programs that have underachieved based on their 4-year recruiting ranking average. And I can look at what Nebraska's done on the field and say, yes, they've underachieved. There's some games they should have won. Speaking of Fleck, I think of the Minnesota game. That back-to-back, that Minnesota and Illinois game were just killers last year. But I think overall Nebraska's not that far away from putting a drive together or getting a stop and getting a win in a lot of these close games. I think you could see, you want to see that happen here in 2021. Do you chalk up Nebraska's failure on field because it's not been able to translate their recruits, that recruiting ranking, that composite 24/7 top 25 number? I don't necessarily chalk it up to the recruits because, quite frankly, they've not retained a lot of those high level. They've kept a lot of good players, but they've also lost a lot of guys that helped bring that ranking up to a 25. I just think it's overall discipline on the field that's been the issue to them not living up to snuff. From an underachieving standpoint, it's not been the recruiting side of things where, listen, they've not gotten performances out of some of their players. I think they've gotten really good performances out of some of the young guys, the Ty Robinsons of the world, the Casey Rogers of the world. I look at Adrian. I know he's had his ups and downs, but he's had pretty good moments at quarterback. And I think, honestly, you're going to see some of those young pups on the O-line. If Nebraska's going to move forward, you're going to have better years from some of those guys that could pop this year. Where are you at with that? With Nebraska's underachievement, what do you pin it on?
Well, doing it via the method that Max did for the Athletic, I looked at that and I was like, well, here's basically the story of Nebraska's entire time in the Big Ten. So Nebraska's in the bottom 10 or 15 or whatever it was, and you look over to the top 10 or 15. And who's there? Northwestern, Iowa, Wisconsin. Recruiting rankings give us a good kind of ballpark estimate of how talented teams are. So you could look at, well, this team has recruited the 10th best class, and they're playing a team that's recruited 20. The higher talent team is going to win the majority of the time. It's, and that works across the board. It's good enough for that. I think one of the problems I have with recruiting is that we kind of look at these rankings and without fully understanding how small the gaps are. For like, I was looking at the 2019 composite rankings. Alabama's number one based on the points, whatever formula 247 uses to tabulate that. Based on points, it's 38 points ahead of number 6 Oklahoma. Oklahoma, to go 38 points further down the list, took you down to like 23 in Mississippi State. So there's everyone between 23 and 6 is kind of in the same group in my mind. And if you go from Mississippi State, it takes you all the way down to like 40 in Kentucky. So, I mean, these groups get really big. What we really have with recruiting is like 4 or 5 teams that get the lion's share of the talent. And everybody below that is closer than I think we typically think of if you just look at the rankings. So for me, why is Nebraska in that bottom 10 list? It comes down to the development part of it. But you also mentioned something, just the attrition. Like, instead of using rankings or points, let's assign a money value to this. Let's say Nebraska's number 24 ranked class is worth $10,000. Mm-hmm. And in Alabama at the top is maybe a $100,000 class. Like, the tax rate for Nebraska right now is 40% because that's what they lose in attrition over a 4-year span. Like, it's stayed that way for the entire decade. So your $10,000 is actually $6,000. So you got to overcome that part too. And that means you've got to be really, really good at development.
Brandon, how would you grade the current coaching staff's recruiting as a whole since they've arrived? I mean, I know the composites say that they're top 25 in terms of their recruiting, or right around that 25 mark. But whenever you look at the recruiting, that they've missed in some key positions, and then with all that attrition, 25th best in the country doesn't sound about right to me. I mean, where would you grade the recruiting, either on an F to A scale or on a terms of the top 25? Like, go either way with that. But just how would you rate the recruiting of this staff?
Yeah, so if they're signing, top 25 classes, I would say they produced at maybe like a 35 to 40 level. Which kind of ties into a little bit of what I was saying, is that the difference between 25 and 40 is really actually pretty small. So what you actually have is this coaching staff, I think, has boosted Nebraska's recruiting a little bit. And it's been during a unique time, the transfer portal, December signing, their first signing class. Like, there's a lot that's still in motion with these classes that make it tough to evaluate right now. And also the fact that Nebraska's held a lot of it in reserve when it could. We haven't seen a lot of these guys play that were even signed in like 2019, one of those early classes. So there's that part of it too. But the overall point is like, where Nebraska has recruited, it's in basically somewhere between tier 2 and tier 3, I would say. And we can look at that at the end of the year and it's almost every year, and say, well, that's better than Iowa, that's better than Wisconsin, it's better than what Northwestern did. But it's only really just a little bit better. And if those programs, and it's proven out at this point over more than one decade, are really, really good at identifying the talent that they need and developing it, then on paper, Nebraska's 20th in the country and Iowa's 36th is virtually null.
Mm-hmm. That's just it. You want kids around here to get developed, and if your tax rate's 40%, you're not getting to develop too many guys because they're not here. And that's. But I look at folks. I look at a couple names here. I mean, the Hail Varsity Yearbook has an incredible profile on Nebraska, but also the rest of the Big Ten, and some great features. Miles Farmer, we need to see more of. But when we've seen Miles Farmer, hey, kid, go in and start at Northwestern 2 picks later. That's young talent that was ready to ball, and until he got injured was doing nice. Small window, but that's a good view. Luke Reimer, guy that they found at the linebacker spot when he stays healthy can really fly around to the football. Ty Robinson, Casey Rogers, Darian Daniels. I mean, that's just the defensive side of the ball. Corcoran, Benhart on your outside. Maybe, Cam has an all Big Ten level. I know there's some stacked centers in this league, but Austin Allen. I mean, there's the possibility of Vogues to see some of that development, that payoff, and then the $1 million question is, what kind of development can you get out of your running back as we kind of close out here? That's a position group Elijah and I focused on yesterday, and you got a lot of candidates. We'll kind of get your final say there on what you hope to see development-wise with the running game. Do you think you can find an A and a B and a 2B?
I mean, that might be the best example for what we're talking about here this year, at least, is that running back spot. Because you've got guys who, I mean, Gabe Urban's new, but beyond that, you've got guys who have been in the program, and you haven't quite had the rushing production in terms of handoff run game that Nebraska needs, in my opinion, to be successful. So you've got a slew of options. It's hard for me to identify one at this point just based on what we've seen, because we haven't seen a ton. I still kind of, when I handicap this race, look at Marvin Scott, and I liked him coming out of high school. He was the closest to getting significant playing time last year. Does that carry over? Or is somebody like Urban just kind of, well, we found the right guy finally, and he's our best player there? There's no good kind of options, but when I look at this 2021 season, and at this point in the off season, we're all pretty good, right, at looking at the roster and be like, well, there's your most experienced guard. He's probably going to play a lot. And there's your most experienced tackle, et cetera, et cetera. I think a very good development for Nebraska would be some of those young players who we know all their names, but we just don't know what to think about them, really start having an impact and start pushing and be like, well, I wouldn't even have had that guy on my 2 deep, but here he is. We're 6 games in, and he's one of the best players of the season so far. Nebraska really needs that. It's time for some of those guys to pop, I think. Who are they going to be? I don't know, but they're far enough into this that I think that's a pretty fair expectation.
Brandon Vogel with us, HailVarsity.com and magazine. Vogues, enjoy your weekend. Thanks for giving us a few minutes today, bud.
You too, guys. Thanks.
Awesome. Good chat, man. Great to get in touch with Vogues on the weekend edition. Podcast will be up here shortly after 9. Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, Hail Varsity Radio. Give us a rating, good, bad, or ugly. Subscribe. It don't cost you nothing. Enjoy as we gear up towards football. We'll check in next with the Iron Horse. Gary Sharp's on the way with Hail Varsity, presented by the Nebraska Lottery.
Glad to have you back.
Yes, sir. You heard me right.
Here are the guys, Schmidt and Kranak.
Well, Hector, here's the game plan. You're going to bring us 2 absolute martinis. You know how I like them, straight up. And then precisely 7 1/2 minutes after that, you're going to bring us 2 more. Then 2 more after that every 5 minutes until one of us passes out. Excellent strategy, sir.
Back to it, weekend edition, Hail Varsity Radio, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. Chris Schmidt and Elijah Herbel sending good vibes and thoughts to Mark Kranak as he gets better, bless his heart. And we are going to focus in on some baseball and talk to the Iron Horse. Gary Sharp joins us. Sharpie, first and foremost, brother, I know you're in Omaha. You doing all right? It's just Elijah's eastern part of Lincoln, kind of near the interstate Havelock region, and got rocked a little bit, but it sounds like Omaha got worked something fierce by some storms. You guys doing okay up there?
Well, I appreciate the thoughts. Yeah, we're not in good shape here in Omaha. We got I'm in the Exarban Village area, and so we don't have any power. We haven't had power since I know over the miles, a 100-mile of wind that came right through my neighborhood. It was probably about 12:30 that the power got knocked out, but I kind of got out in the neighborhood, and that's where I'm at now, so you might hear chainsaws in the background. I mean, there's trees down everywhere. So, yeah, Omaha took the brunt of it. You know, we have the U.S. Senior Open in town, and they got crushed out at OCC, and that is in the north part of Omaha. So we'll rebuild. We'll survive. We'll move on. But, yeah, it was wild last night.
Well, thoughts with you guys and just checking social media. So many without power, a lot of postings of friends in Omaha and neighborhoods and just some great memories of, trees you grew up with and just the region where a lot of wooded, areas in Omaha and thinking about you guys up there. So, take care and God bless, and we'll send you the help you may need, bud. So, Sharpie, a pretty big weekend for Nebraska baseball. Obviously, Spencer Schwellenbach. We'll hear his name, but what does the future hold for Cade Povich and Jackson Hallmark? The feel is that they're back, but then you've got members of this recruiting class, great recruiting class that we'll both put together with Drew Christo and Chase Mason. How's your gut feeling about what Nebraska looks like Tuesday morning?
Well, I think first let's start with Schwelly. You're on Schwelly watch tomorrow. He could go in the first round. I think he'll be gone by the end of the second round, and that's great for Nebraska, great for him. And then we'll be curious to see how he's utilized in professional baseball. With Cade Povich, there was probably part of the year you thought, okay, Cade has established himself as the number one guy. He's going to come back. And then as he performed during the season and you saw his repertoire of pitches and kind of his makeup, I think his draft stock went up. I don't expect Cade to be back. I think Cade gets drafted on the second day and has an opportunity to go play professional baseball. I don't think Nebraska is counting on him coming back. Now, Jackson Hallmark, I think there's a real possibility that he'll be back, and that would be huge. Then to the bigger ones. Drew Christo, I've seen him many times. He's going to be the athlete of the year in the Omaha World Herald. He's three-sport star, Dad Monty. We talked about him a lot. The thing with Drew is it's gotten closer to the draft. And there have been plenty of scouts that have seen him. He went to the draft combine. There is the prevailing thought among major league teams is that he's going to be tough to keep away from Nebraska. And if that does turn out to be the case, then that is huge for Nebraska, of course, because Drew comes in and he's going to be a guy that's going to pitch somewhere on your weekend in the Big Ten. Now, Chase Mason up in South Dakota. I mean, this is kind of Roy Hobbs, the natural. Small-town South Dakota kid, 6'5", 215, can run like the wind. He's got, he's a four-sport athlete. People have said if he played professional baseball, he'd be a 25-25 guy, 25 homers, 25 stolen bases. He might be a little bit more difficult to coax out of the draft and into Lincoln. But if Will Bolt goes 2 for 2 with those two guys, and you already look at the recruiting class that he's assembled, I mean, Nebraska's going to pick right up where they left off at the end of last year, and that's just the momentum in the build. And it's a crazy time for college baseball coaches. One, because there's a ton of players in the portal, and then two, you've got these draft guys that they're going to get drafted, and it's about a month until school starts. So what happens if somebody decides late? Then you're not really going to be able to replace them. So it'll be a good day it'll be a good 3 days for Nebraska. It'll show you what kind of talent is in the program now and what they're recruiting. But I think Nebraska will turn out to be a winner in the Major League Baseball draft.
Gary Sharp's with us, the Iron Horse, Hail Varsity Radio, talking Husker baseball and Huskers in the Major League Baseball draft this weekend. And good for Schwelly. I think you're right on with Povich. Does Chase Mason remind you of anybody? I know you've been up close and personal with Drew Christo, but I love the Hobbs comparison with size and speed and the track athleticism, because Chase did track as well. Does he remind you anybody either past or current in Major League Baseball? Not to unfairly put pressure on him, but what's his swing and his game remind you of?
They're not the same size, but I'll keep it with Nebraska and the Major League Baseball draft. A little bit like Monty Harrison.
Okay.
Monty Harrison is one of the best high school wide receivers I've ever seen in person, and he made the wise decision to sign to go play professional baseball. It never ended up in Lincoln. They have a very similar type of game. The way they swing, the way they run, they've got a natural feel for the game. So that would be kind of the closest comparison. But, it's tough to find one because he's 6'5", 215, has got a sweet-looking swing. I think he's one that it's going to be tough to keep away from the draft because Major League Baseball scouts are going to look at him, and they're going to look at the upside, and they're going to say, okay, here's a guy that still is kind of raw, but look what he has. And he went to the draft combine a couple of weeks ago and just wowed people. But whether he ends up at Nebraska or not, that's a great sign for Will Bolt. That Will Bolt is kind of locking down the region. He starts in-state and then moves to the region to recruit, and he's getting guys like this to say yes to him. Now you'll really see the pull if he gets guys like Chase Mason and Drew Christo to turn down some fairly good money to come to college, because it's not like you're coming to college for 1 year. You're going to come to college, and you're going to be in school for 3 years before you're eligible for the draft again. But this is also where maybe name, image, likeness, for the first time with college baseball going against the draft, you can actually use that and maybe convince some guys that were 14, 15, 16-round picks in a 20-round draft that it would be better for them to come to school, that they could make a little bit of money.
Do you have any, Sharp, you grew up in baseball. I mean, when it comes to draft and development and players, and you know it well. What's the number at? Do you have any wild guess for Mason or for Christo? What is the number? What would it be possible with where their draft slots projected at, and what a team could throw at them?
Well, and it depends on, of course, where they're drafted, and there's slot money for each spot in the Major League Baseball draft. And teams can go over it, but they can't get ridiculous. They just cannot spend an absurd amount of money. But if they go later in the draft and you put a package together, you're probably at 150, okay, 200K, in that range. And everybody's deal is we'll pay for all of your schooling, whether you've got any school left or you have not gone to college yet. So it's a pretty good package. But the thing that actually may work well for Nebraska here is if a major league team has a feel that guys are not going to sign and they're going to go to school, you only have a 20-round draft. This is not the 40-round draft anymore, where you can take flyers on guys. Basically, major league teams are saying, if we only have 20 picks, and some may have 22, 24, 25 picks, but we only have 20 rounds, we want to draft guys that we're pretty sure that we're going to be able to sign and get in our system. We don't want to draft the guy high and then have him say, nope, I'm going to college, and there goes our fifth-round pick. So that's another part that maybe benefits Nebraska with these two guys and the draft, and the feeling that one of them, Drew Christo, is probably going to Nebraska. The other, you're 50-50, 60-40.
Gary, I want to ask you about Cade Povich, because I really was expecting him to come back this year, and I guess we don't know yet, but is there a round number you're looking at that if he goes ahead of this round, he's probably going to be going to the majors, or I should say going pro, or is it just if he goes at all because it's that 20-round draft?
Well, I think he's a 5th or 7th-round guy. That's just my personal opinion, and I don't know. Cade coming back to pitch another year, is his stock going to go up? He had a really, really good year, and he showed scouts everything he needs to show. I don't know if he comes back for another year, all of a sudden he develops another pitch. I think it would be to refine some things, but he's still going to be the same number one guy that you had last year. I think if he's in the 5th to 7th round area, maybe even to the 10th, then he's gone. But I think he'll get drafted, and I think he will elect to sign and start his professional career.
And Gary, you talked about name, image, and likeness being an advantage for Nebraska here, but is being just in the Big Ten a disadvantage for them? Because we know the Big Ten doesn't care all that much about baseball with how they treated this season. So is Nebraska at a disadvantage just because of their conference and trying to get these guys to stick and stay at Nebraska?
I don't think so, Elijah. I mean, that's a fair question. But I don't think so with Nebraska because it's baseball. And you see the attention and the passion towards baseball at Nebraska. And that's a little bit different where you're worried about just your guys in your baseball program with name, image, likeness. You don't care that there are guys in your program that play in the Big Ten. And there's enough people that care about Nebraska baseball. And, there's enough people to go to games. And there's enough of, personalities that are on that roster that can be a benefit and not a hindrance.
Gary Sharp's with us a few minutes here. Hail Varsity Radio Weekend Edition, the Iron Horse. Sharpie, let's go to basketball. Role for Alonzo Verge from Arizona State. What do you see him doing and fitting? How do you see him shaking into that Hoiberg rotation? Loved Verge's film. Really slithery to the rim. Nice job of finishing. And he is instant offense. Do you think he's a guy that cracks the starting lineup? Do you figure that out? Or do you think you go a little Vinnie Johnson with him as a sixth man here? You got both options.
Well, I think when he's coming in, maybe off the bench is the role that he'll play. Of course, he was a sixth man of the year off the bench a couple years ago in the Pac-12. I think it's an interesting pickup. Nebraska is in no way in a spot where they can turn down talent. And they're always trying to look to upgrade their roster. I think they have a roster right now, before the announcement of Verge the other day, that they like their chemistry. Guys, they kind of had the core come back, and they've added some new pieces that they're making progress. And they Fred thinks in year 3, you get the sense that he really likes the makeup of his team. Now, back to Verge. There's no doubt he can score. I mean, he has the craziest game against St. Mary's last year where he scores 43 and the rest of his team scores 56. And Verge scored 43 off the bench, and they lost by 40 to St. Mary's. He is instant offense. He has played a lot of games at a high level. It's going to add to the guards. I mean, they got plenty of guys that can handle the basketball. But the problem goes back again. If you watch Verge, everything you said, Schmitty, about his ability to get to the rim and finish, is he going to be able to shoot the basketball outside?
Right.
That's the problem with Nebraska. Banton leaves, and one of the hiccups about him is he couldn't shoot. Well, now you add a guy who can't shoot consistently from beyond the arc, so that's a problem. But Nebraska is definitely going to have guys that can hoop it up and score. I mean, they're going to try and outscore a lot of teams. He's an interesting fit. Now, how does he work into the culture with a guy arriving late who is, 1 year, wants to get to the NBA? We'll see how that works. But, you can't turn down talent, and to add a guy that averaged 14 points at Arizona State, I mean, what a nice little boost in the arm in the middle of July.
Gary, we've heard from the McGowan's Brothers podcast that it's kind of NCAA tournament or bust for this team this year. That is really their goal. And they also want to have some all Big Ten caliber guys on this team. But I want to ask you, what is a realistic expectation or goal for this Fred Hoiberg team in year 3? Is it NCAA tournament or where do you think it is?
Well, I think that's a great goal to have. And you sense the urgency from the head coach. He made changes in the offseason. He addressed what has plagued them the last 2 years. He removed Teddy Allen scored a lot, but Teddy Allen probably did not help the rest of the team when they weren't playing basketball. And so you remove that. You feel better about your culture, but you said, okay, our guys got to get better in the basketball stuff, so let's go hire an assistant who is good with development. Bingo, did that. I want our guys to be stronger. I want them to be faster. I want to be able to control my strength and conditioning and have a familiarity with my guy that runs that. Boom, he did that. I think the expectation, this is a program that we know what the past history says. I think the realistic expectation for Nebraska, and I would be disappointed, I hope other people are disappointed, you make it to Valentine's Day, and if Nebraska is not like in a mock draft or in a mock bracket, like, on the outside or anywhere near the middle, I think that's disappointing. Valentine's Day, Nebraska is not being mentioned like as a bubble team, that they're already done. They've got to play games that matter in March. And you never know. I mean, the Big Ten is going to be loaded at the top. It's going to be stacked in the top 5. And usually you're getting about 7 to 8 bids. Can you sneak into that 8th spot? I think it's a possibility, but we have to wait to see how all of these pieces fit together. But he has more depth and talent on his roster than he's had in his first 2 years.
Sharpie, 49 days till football. We'll finally get to football.
Wow.
I mean, we're all geared up for it. I want to get your take here with the mini purchase plan that was released earlier in the week. Do you like it, and what 3 games are you picking if Gary Sharp is in the stands and not the press box?
Well, I think they're trying to bring in new fans. The sellout streak is one of those things that probably needs to end. It just kind of is the elephant in the room. And we know that the sellout streak has been beaten to death now for a few years about, is it real, is it not, how does it work? Well, let's focus on the future of Nebraska football and get butts in seats. They need to introduce new fans to Nebraska football. It's no longer, hey, take for granted that it's just Nebraska football and people show up. So I like the idea. That's kind of where the industry is going. A full season ticket isn't for everyone. Not everybody can make 8 football Saturdays. Not everybody can pay the price on the ticket and the donation. So give them options. Give them if you can only come to 1 game or maybe only 3 games, give them an option. And I like what they did. It's people around the country are doing it. Even programs that usually have no problem selling out their stadiums because they want to introduce their product to new fans to turn them into full time season ticket holders. Now, the games I would go with, I love night games in Lincoln, so I would go Northwestern, Michigan, and then you got to go Iowa.
I don't disagree. I was right there, and I mean Purdue's always been kind of an entertaining or sad, depending on the year, game. It's been so long since everyone's been at an opener together, right? I mean, spring game notwithstanding, the Fordham game would be feel good because it's the opener. You get to get back with your chums in West Stadium. And, oh, yeah, by the way, it's a win, we hope, right? And so you get to go see a win. Buffalo doesn't have as much umph for me anymore without Lance there. And, no, those are the three I'm going with as well. But I think you nailed it as far as kind of tapping into that different demo, that new demo, regenerate a fan base and make it affordable. So the Elijahs or the Schmidts of the world that you might be able to find a couple $100 to go see 3 games, and you're not getting rocked on a seat license. You can swing by Uncle Nate's tailgate, still do it, and it works out well. I really like this, but does it kind of feed into that fear to some about the sellout streak? And you touched on it, like we talked to a couple of national guys this week that. Look, the sellout streak is an incredible testament and statement about the fan base, and that's the reality with Nebraska. Well, Nebraska is working on getting better on the field, so it's not an issue anymore, Sharpie.
Well, I think it's unique, and it is a testament to the fans of Nebraska that have supported this program through the highs and the lows, and they love the program, and it's an investment in the program. But the stadium has expanded. Things have changed. People are staying at home a little bit more. The product on the field, you're not getting your return on investment. And it's not just, hey, it's just Nebraska, so I'm going to go no matter what. Now, the demographic has changed where people want something for their money. I do this. And, again, I think the sellout streak is unique to Nebraska. And if it went away, I don't think I'd be upset. If it happens to make it to 376, okay, another sellout. I do this experiment with people that get all fired up about the sellout streak, especially when people are like, you have to preserve it. Do anything you can. I would say, well, do you know what it's at right now? Do you know what the number is? And if I can't answer it, then I just move on to the next piece of conversation. Yeah. For people at home, it's at 375, which is ridiculous to have 375 consecutive sellouts. But remember, Notre Dame had a streak where their sellout streak came to an end, and I got another one for you. Michigan this year may have another streak in the capacity that comes to an end. They are worried in Ann Arbor that they may have a football game where they don't have 100,000 in the big house.
Jeez.
So it's it's an industry thing in college football where people are trying to figure out if our product is not top notch on the field, how do we still get people in the stands and that they don't stay at home and have a better seat to watch the football game?
Sharpie, awesome chat today, brother. Thanks for giving us the time. Well wishes to you and your friends up in Omaha. We'll see you a little bit later today.
Hey, thanks, guys.
Take care. There he is, the Iron Horse, Gary Sharp. Elijah's saying, you've had enough time, old man, on your Saturday morning. We'll be back at you Monday on a Hail.
We go another 30 seconds here.
Okay, well, you're telling me I keep traveling.
I should have hit you with the stretch, not the...
No, the middle finger and the throat slit is what you want to get me to shut up. You flip me off, and you give me the old Colombian necktie, okay?
Well, I thought I'd give you some time to end the show on a good note here.
Well, I was like, Elijah, is there a fire in the studio? Like, hurry up, I got to go to the can. 4 o'clock, Monday. Take care. Have a great weekend. Back at you Monday on Hail Varsity.